FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is 2/4/20. Well, if you were watching yesterday, we saw on Monday, Chinese central bank pumped in $176 billion to keep the system afloat. The pandemic virus scare is well underway. It's happening as you watch. And where is that going to leave everything else? And is Brexit really a Trojan horse? So you might come to that conclusion if you listen to what the global elite are saying now. Well, let's listen to what John Rubino has to say. And you find John's work over at dollarcollapse.com. John, so, hey, we got interesting things happening in the world. One good thing is, or bad thing, depending on your perspective, the impeachment is all but over in name in any event, right?
Yeah. Hey, Kerry. Well, that was always going to resolve pretty much exactly as it is resolving, because it was never meaningful. You know, the Democrats are just desperate to get Trump, and it has led them to be irrational and really grasp at straws here, and put themselves at risk, because the bigger underlying story of the impeachment narrative is, first of all, that the Steele dossier and the original investigation into the Trump campaign was financed by the DNC and the Clinton campaign. This was opposition research that was derived from sources in Russia. So in other words, they were working with the Russians to steal an American election. And that is kind of, it's not the main narrative here, but there's still an investigation going on into what the FBI did that could lead to some higher ups. And in other words, the people in the Clinton campaign and people in the Obama administration being implicated in what was effectively an attempted coup. And that's the thing the Democrats have set themselves up for here. And their mainstream candidate is also tainted by this, because Biden's son is at the center of the second phase of the attempt to get Trump. If you look at what Trump did, he was trying to investigate the corruption of the Bidens. So maybe Trump did it in an inappropriate way, but you can't tell that story without looking at Biden and his son and his brother and all the inappropriate stuff they did over the years. So the Democrats kind of shot themselves in the foot in multiple ways with this. And once it ends, it will disappear without a trace until they revive it in some other way. This may not be the end. They may try some other kind of investigation to have it be fresh at the time of the election, because that's really the goal of everybody in this, is to have their story be dominating just as people go to vote. And so the Democrats want Trump is corrupt, we need to get rid of him story out there. And Trump wants, Joe Biden is totally corrupt and probably senile. He wants that story to be out there if Biden is the candidate that he has to run against. Yeah. So
it's really fascinating when you get down to watching
it's embarrassing, really. This is just such low level stuff, There's no sophistication at all in any of this. And, as an American, I'm kind of embarrassed for us, because we should be able to do stuff like this in a more sophisticated way if we're going to do it. We're corrupt, but at least we're smart. That would be the story then. But now we're corrupt and we're stupid at the same time, and it's painful to watch.
It really is. It's pathetic to think that they could pull it off, to believe that they were actually able to pull this off, that they had a possibility of it. It's just kind of shocking.
Well, it is, because it takes a 2/3 vote in the Senate to convict a president in an impeachment trial, and the Republicans run the Senate. So the Democrats were Well, I don't think they were hoping. They couldn't possibly have thought that this was something that would ever rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors that would force a bunch of Republicans to vote to convict their president. They couldn't have thought that. But I think they did think of this as a way to generate ammo for use during the election campaign. And to that extent, maybe it still works for them on some level, because maybe they have a few things they can throw out there over and over again. But I really think not. I think it's so blatantly and transparently a political operation rather than a legal operation that it probably cost the Democrats votes this time around. And now you've got Bernie Sanders surging in the polls heading into Iowa, which is today, and then New Hampshire after that, which also has the Democrats power spooked, because they, the Clinton wing of the party, which is, let's say it's half the party, I don't know, but it's probably, a pretty close balance between the bomb throwing socialists and the incremental corporatists in the Democrat Party right now. And that terrifies them. And so now you're seeing stories. I just posted a headline for one of the stories on dollarcollapse.com's links list about how a Bernie Sanders victory would spook the stock market. So that might be one of the narratives going forward in the financial markets, that, oh my God, the Democrats are maybe nominating a socialist. And then you've got Bloomberg rising in the polls on the strength of a massive spending. And I saw one of his commercials the other day, and it was not bad. It was, it probably was full of lies, but if you don't know they're lies, then it is a pretty strong commercial that he had. Oh, we cut New York's emissions by this when he was mayor, and we did that. We cut crime by it was a portrait of a competent guy. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that he can spend hundreds of millions of dollars putting that message out there, then maybe he becomes a factor going forward too. They're letting him in the next debate, apparently.
Changing the rules midstream.
Yeah, changing the rules.
Yeah. Like he doesn't have 250,000 individual donors, but that doesn't matter because he donated $500,000 to the Democratic Party a couple of months back, right?
And, they get away with this stuff because so few people are paying attention. But once you look into the corruption of the DNC, and I'm not
I know you're
saying
not.
that the Republicans are better when I criticize the DNC.
Certainly not.
But it is really blatant. The last time around, Clinton basically bought the DNC by assuming its debts and everything, and was able to engineer basically the theft of the nomination from Bernie Sanders. And this time around, it's not even anybody's campaign doing it. It's just the DNC is run by Clinton level centrists. And for them, it's very clear what has to happen, and they're just going for it. So I don't know. This has the makings of a really tempestuous and theatrical campaign, which will be fun to watch. I don't think anything comes of it because it really doesn't matter. People get frustrated when they hear that it doesn't matter who's president. But really, I mean, if the Republicans are in charge, they're not the party of small government anymore. They're running $1 trillion deficits and lobbying the Fed for lower interest rates. So how much worse from a financial standpoint would Bloomberg or even Bernie Sanders be? I mean, we're heading off a financial cliff either way. So, but there are different levels of entertainment. What's going to happen? And I think Sanders-Trump would be so much fun to watch. So that's what I want to happen.
What about Sanders?
I really don't care from a financial or an investment standpoint because it looks like we're screwed no matter what. But it would be fun to watch those two guys go toe to toe politically, just because they're such vivid personalities. And neither one of them has the slightest bit of fear when they go out there. And I think that would be fun. But beyond that, I don't think we're fixable or savable or anything.
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree, barring some type of economic miracle where just we figure out that there's gold in tap water or something, and then what would the gold be worth?
But, well, the other much bigger story, I think, than the election is the whole virus thing. Mm-hmm. And how it's impacting the global economy, because China is partially on lockdown right now, and you're seeing all these headlines, no Chinese welcome and things like that, where flights from China are just being banned now. So the Chinese
all over
people, the business people who need to go do deals around the world, can't get out to do it, and they're stuck behind basically quarantines lines in their cities where the hospitals are overwhelmed and everything. So this is a scary thing, but at the same time, they're already testing a vaccine in China.
Yes,
and it looks like the virus itself isn't like Ebola or something like that, where you get it and you die horribly within a couple of weeks. This is one of those things where 3% of the people who get it die, and they're the people who have impaired immune systems already most of the time. So it's not Black Death going global or anything like that, but it is scary. I have to go to Seattle this week, and there's a case of this stuff in Seattle. So I'm thinking about that, even though, statistically it's a meaningless risk compared to all the other risks of going into a big city. But I'm seeing it in the news and it's on my mind. And that affects this kind of, a globalized economy requires free, uninhibited movement of people, capital, and products. And when you interfere with that, you lower growth. And when you lower growth, you cut corporate profits, which in turn affects stock prices. So that's one side of the ledger. But the other side is actually dominating today, which is that all the central banks of the world are ready. They are primed to shovel immense amounts of cash into the system if this thing turns out to be real. And you're seeing that, for instance, in U.S. interest rates. Remember, interest rates went back up. The yield curve had inverted in 2019. And everybody thought, oh, that's a guaranteed recession signal because it's always been that way. And then, boom, interest rates went back up at the long end of the spectrum. And the yield curve uninverted. Well, now it's back to inverted because long rates have plunged so dramatically. Now, the 30-year rate, or 30-year Treasury bond today, was yielding 1.99% last I checked, which means it has a one handle, which means it's as close to as low as it's ever been. It's been lower just briefly one time in 2019. And what that means is that the global economy is seeing a huge rush to safety, and it's very worried about what happens if this virus thing spreads. And it's also anticipating central banks easing really aggressively. So that's liable to be the big story. If the virus ends up slowing down the global economy, it's not going to cause 50 million deaths or anything like that. It is going to kill some people. But if it spreads to the extent that it slows down the global economy, then look out. We'll see QE to infinity out there, and we'll see interest rates just not even pushed down. They will be pegged at some ridiculously low level. So what would have been the next recession that occurred naturally, just because we've gone on so long and we've taken on so much debt and there's nobody else to lend money to that's capable of paying back a big loan, might be accelerated by this external shock. And we might get what would have happened in 2021, 2022. We might get it this year. And that's sort of also to be expected because stuff happens out there. You don't just march along with a completely benign global environment beyond finance forever. There's always some kind of a war, or there's always some kind of other crisis that spooks people and affects the global economy. So this was the kind of thing that, it's one of the external shocks, one of the black swans that was always going to happen. And now it's happening. Now we know the shape of it. But it could have been that Middle Eastern war that almost happened.
Could have been.
Or it could be Deutsche Bank's derivatives book blowing up. There's all kinds of stuff that could tip this thing over into a recession. And the pandemic thing was actually less likely than those other two things. But it was always something that was out there as a possibility because we've created the conditions for something like that to happen. And you think about these mega cities. When you have 25 million people in one city, how can there not be a pandemic at some point, right? because everybody's breathing the same air and drinking the same water and doing other things in the water that you shouldn't do if it's you're drinking water. But in a big city like that, that's just how it works. And so you create the conditions when for big, bad health scares. So this is just the latest, but it might be the biggest of the past few decades. And it might be enough to cause something serious in the global financial system. But today, the markets don't think so. U.S. stocks are up and interest rates or bond prices are also up, which is why same thing as saying interest rates are down. So the markets are all of a sudden looking at the central bank easing that's automatically going to come if anything happens and thinking that's the bigger factor. And it could easily be the bigger factor. Central bank easing is such a powerful tool right now for manipulating markets that we have to respect it. And you can't just short everything in sight based on valuation when you've got these central banks that are out there. They haven't started buying equities yet in the United States on any scale, at least that they're telling us.
Yeah, not that we know of.
Yeah, that we know of. But that's coming, and it's going to come publicly when this thing really gets going. When the next recession hits and an equities bear market looks like it might be possible, you'll see the Fed come out and say, okay, we're buying the S&P 500 with $1 trillion this month. And what does that mean for stock prices? There's no way to know. You can go from overvalued to much more overvalued if you've got enough outside liquidity flowing in. And that's how bubbles happen. And that's how bubbles get to levels that just don't make any sense beyond the fact that there's a huge amount of external liquidity that's flowing in and nobody cares about prices anymore. They just need to put that liquidity to work somehow. And so let all the central banks of the world be the ones doing that. And just who knows? You can't know what'll happen.
No, you really don't know what's going to happen. Hey, speaking of exponential, parabolic, and all of that good stuff, what about Tesla? Close to $700. And I know they're revolutionizing the world. There's a lot to like about the company, but do you like the stock at $700?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Otis Gold Corp is a gold development and exploration company with quality projects in the pro-mining state of Idaho. Otis's flagship Kilgore project has a resource of 961,000 gold ounces, and its recently published preliminary economic assessment demonstrated an impressive post-tax IRR of 53% at $1,500 gold. In addition to the significant expansion potential at Kilgore, Otis is exploring its highly prospective Oakley project. This Carlin-type gold deposit already has an inferred resource, and previous near-surface drilling intersected 123 meters of 0.69 grams per ton gold. Otis Gold Corp trades in New York under the ticker OGLDF and in Toronto under the ticker OOO. That's triple O. To learn more, go to otisgold.com. That's otisgold.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, I shorted them last week, and I was so proud of myself because I thought I caught the very peak when on that one big spike.
Yeah.
I shorted it, and it looks like I was a day early or more. We'll see, because it's spiking again today.
I know.
But we're talking about valuation levels here for a company that makes physical stuff. See, here's the problem with a richly valued car company is that you by definition can't have really wide margins because you're working with stuff, and you have to buy that the steel to make, or the fiberglass, or whatever it is you make the body for your car out of, and the engine for your car. You have to buy that stuff, and you have to buy the lithium for your batteries. And it's not like a software company where you can sell 10 more million copies of Microsoft Office or something like that, and the cost to you is basically zero. There's not that kind of leverage in a company that exists in the physical world. So the fact that one car company is now by far the most valuable car company, Tesla is way bigger in terms of market cap than Volkswagen is, but Volkswagen sells vastly more cars and is coming into the market with electric cars, as is everybody else. So we'll see. But that's the short story with Tesla. And today it's not working.
Well, yeah.
But it will work eventually.
Eventually. Well, one thing is that Tesla is so far ahead of all of the other car companies when it comes to EVs. They're just way far ahead in batteries, in recharging stations, in technology, in autonomous driving, the potential for fully autonomous driving, and the potential for all these other technologies that they developed, handling electric, the battery technology, which they're just leaps and bounds ahead, and they've made a couple of acquisitions. Imagine if the next major Tesla product has a range of 600 miles, John. I mean, that is going to be a total game changer.
The idea that nobody else can build electric cars that are good and priced attractively, I think is going to turn out to be false, though, because, Porsche is out with a sports car that I just saw a review of not long ago saying this is the best electric car in the world. So some reviewer drove it and liked it better than the Tesla that he drove last time around. And the idea that that's not a possibility is one of the things that creates bubbles in individual stocks. When the idea takes hold that nobody else on earth can do this thing, then you can pay any price for the stock.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, so for Tesla could be a very successful company going forward, but its current valuation could still turn out to be really excessive. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, when you have a PE ratio of several hundred on a car company, the kind of growth you have to have over the next decade to justify a 300 PE ratio or whatever is highly unlikely. It's the kind of thing where every single thing on earth has to go right, not just with your company, but everybody else has to just fail miserably at competing with you. And the world has to be completely benign, no pandemics and no wars and no political turmoil or anything. That's all the stuff that has to happen for the story to play out that way. And I think it's a reasonable bet that it won't, but you never know. Amazon, for instance, is an example of how something can just continue to work forever. And Apple is another one. But, remember the last 10 years of spectacular growth was during a 10-year expansion for those guys. So the economy made what they did possible. The next 10-year economy is not going to be anything like the last 10 years.
That's for sure. But one thing you got to realize with Tesla is they're expanding their market share. They're expanding their sales, their units produced, while all the other car companies are seeing declines in production and declines in sales. And the other thing you could argue with Tesla's accounting, perhaps, but what you can't argue with is that they don't consider a sale to be made until it gets delivered to the end consumer, because they sell direct. So when you consider that, John, that all the other car companies, it's like when they pump it out to the dealer, and then you have all this channel stuffing. They're in a better position accounting wise. They've got a bunch of $4 billion of convertible debt that's in the money. So that's going to be wiped off the balance sheet. And, they're just set for this space. What'll happen in the future, we can't say. Some genius will come up with something that will blow them away. I have no doubt. But in the meantime, they're sitting on top of the world.
Well, at the peak of a parabolic move, whether it's in the whole stock market or an individual stock, there are always these great reasons why people say it's going to keep on going. But usually those are the reasons that got the thing there to begin with.
Yes.
And continuing and maintaining the advantages that got them there in the first place turns out to be the hard thing. Because success breeds imitators. And in this case, everybody in the world is bringing out electric cars. So, you never know with something like this. But
don't get me wrong.
This fits the profile of a classic short. So I'll say that.
I agree.
If history is any guide, you can look at 20 or 30 other companies over the past just couple of decades, really. You don't even have to go back to the tech stock bubble. For examples of things you wish you had shorted at this point. So we'll see.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the stock's a buy because of it. I'm just saying the competition is really far behind. So as far as where it goes, I'm not sure about it. I'm just not in terms of they have a big jump on everyone. That's my point. Big jump on everyone. Will that continue? Hey, probably not. But for now, they got it. And, well, the market has a funny way of bringing people back to reality, doesn't it, John?
It does. And I've been wrong with bets like this in the past. Years ago, my kids both went out and bought Android phones. And I interpreted that as a sign that Apple was no longer cool and it was a good short candidate. So I shorted that thing and then lost a bunch of money right away and got back out and never tried to do that again. But, this could also be that. But it doesn't feel like it. It feels like something that has a lot of reasons for the story to end in the not too distant future.
It feels
or
like,
not.
It feels
not
like
end, but the stock price story to end.
It feels like Bitcoin. Exactly. I call Tesla the Bitcoin of the stock market. Yeah.
And Bitcoin, the whole world is full of people, or everybody in the world wishes they'd done something with Bitcoin that they didn't do. Because you've had all these parabolic moves and then these crashes. And I have no way I've never been able to figure out why it does what it does. But there are a lot of assets like that. And in a credit bubble, when the central banks are just pumping out huge amounts of cash, that hot money flows into things and creates those kind of situations because the money has to go somewhere and it doesn't want to go to a boring place.
No.
It wants to go where there's already price action. And so many markets are so small relative to the trillions of dollars that central banks are pumping out that you get these crazy parabolic moves for no apparent reason. And then you get all these experts coming on CNN and saying, or CNBC, and saying, yeah, I predicted this. And now my new price target is that, and they turn out to be wrong and they disappear without a trace. But it's just one of the things that become normal in a credit bubble. And so I'm waiting for all that hot money to discover junior mining stocks, gold and silver, and then start bidding them up. And that day is coming too, probably.
Well, look what's happened to the cannabis stocks. They've been totally decimated, right? Very few of them. And you saw that Altria, Philip Morris, took a $4.1 billion hit on their investment in Juul. And you look at that and you say, maybe those cannabis stocks are not so good, right?
Well, cannabis is an amazing story from an economic standpoint, because that's a brand new market. We just took a market that was illegal, it existed in the shadows, and just opened it up. And so you're seeing all these amazing things happen where every new kind of product you can imagine that's related to weed in any way is being announced and brought out and is competing with all the other products. Right? It's just fascinating to watch. But it's really hard to make any kind of money in that market because you've got new competitors coming in. You've got prices for the raw material, which is marijuana itself, plunging. And so how do you figure out who's a winner and a loser in a market like that? And how do you make any money from it? The market itself is going to get huge. And it's going to eventually have some big players. There will be an Amazon of weed at some point in the intermediate future, but there's no way to tell ahead of time who's doing it. Solar panels solar power is like that too. It's growing dramatically, but it's hard to make money in solar stocks because there are so many of them.
Yes.
And the price of what they're selling is going down, which is a tough market to be in because your inventory is depreciating and your cost structure changes from year to year in an unfavorable way a lot of the time. Your costs may not go down as fast as the selling price of your product. So you're generating massive sales, but your margins are shrinking. And that's how it works in these brand new, exponentially growing industries. So from an investor standpoint, sometimes it's better to just watch that stuff from a safe distance rather than trying to profit from your limited information about how that market is evolving. Or it's better to short the things that spike parabolically, because you figure that just that chart pattern means that it's got to give back some of it, and you don't have to understand the industry or anything. You just take advantage of the fact that all this new money is pouring in and it's causing all this turmoil, and you bet on the big spikes not lasting. So that's probably the best way to approach markets like that, because it's really, really hard to figure out who wins in the end.
Very true. Very, very true. And, we've seen it over and over. The one thing about cannabis that made me the skeptic on it, and I was skeptical from the get-go, so I didn't touch any of those stocks. And we represented a number of cannabis stocks at one period, like a year and a half ago when they were booming, is that right now, before legalization, all of the demand for the product was being satisfied, albeit illegally, but it was being satisfied. So then effectively you've got the legal trying to push out the illegal. Now you have the government assisting in that to some extent, but they're going to be as successful in that endeavor as they have been in the past 80 years with the cannabis prohibition. It didn't work too good. So from that standpoint, I knew that these companies were going to fail, at least in the short term. Probably in the long term, I think legal cannabis will definitely prevail, but the problem is the branding aspects. Everybody's saying, well, we're going to create a new brand, a super brand of cannabis, like Canadian Club, like Chivas Regal, like Remy Martin, and all of them. And it just isn't that easy when you're redeveloping a market. That's all was my contention on it, and we'll see what happens. But we'll see what happens with the economy here. It's crazy. Hey, just remember this with Bernie. If you're thinking of Bernie, remember you can vote your way into socialism, but you have to shoot your way out, right?
That's good, and that's true, unfortunately. Yeah. And that might be our future here.
Yeah.
I tell my kids sometimes, you know what? You're going to have to fight a civil war at some point. I'm sorry that we're leaving you with this mess, but to be able to get out from under all this debt and avoid a dictatorship is going to be really tricky, and it's going to be your problem. And I'm sorry. Yeah. But that is probably the case. The next 10 years could easily see some kind of economic authoritarian thing happen in a lot of the big countries, just because of all this debt. It's so disruptive to get rid of excessive debt, and it's really hard to do it politically in a way that keeps you in office.
Yeah, you could make the argument that we're in that civil war already, but it hasn't become a hot civil war. But
we're dividing into different discrete groups who don't even see the other groups as completely human now. I was talking to somebody a while ago. I don't want to say who it is, but it's a relative of mine who was just going off on the Republicans, just criticizing Trump and everything, and in really hateful language. And I said, this is a really big problem, because we've reached the point where the different categories of people now don't even see the others as completely human; they see them as subhuman. And she went, "That's exactly right. Republicans are subhuman," which wasn't what I was trying to say.
Yeah. But, I had a discussion the other day with somebody, intelligent woman, former attorney, recovering attorney like me. And she's saying, oh, he's so corrupt. I can't believe they're not going to throw him out and all of this and that. And I said, what did he do here? And she was harping on the fact that the Bidens were so corrupt, this and that. And then the next minute she was saying, well, Trump should be thrown out of office just for asking that Bidens be investigated for their corruption. I mean, it's just, let's be a little consistent and let's use logic here, but we're past that point, obviously, and that's really unfortunate. Really unfortunate.
Well, yeah, the scary thing about this is that each political group of people now will accept pretty much anything from their guys, but they won't accept anything from the other side's guys. In other words, it doesn't matter what our guy does in terms of corruption, because he's our guy, and so we have this moral relativity evolving now, where there is no right and wrong. There's only, well, is he pro-choice? or is he pro-life or whatever? And it doesn't matter what they do beyond having these positions that you think are so important that we can't take a chance on having this thing not go our way. Therefore, it really doesn't matter what we do to achieve that goal. We're at the ends justify the means stage of this process. And that is a prelude to an actual civil war. And we're going to have to be really careful going forward that we don't let ourselves tip over into something like that. And I'd give us a 50-50 chance of avoiding something that spills from politics into actual, street battles and stuff. It's a terrifying prospect.
Yeah, it really is. And we're going to have to leave the prospects where they are. It's time to go, but we'll be back next week, same time. Check out John's site, dollarcollapse.com, for prolific and extremely well-written articles about what's going on in the financial world today. And that covers the entire world, let's face it. And check us out, financialsurvivalnetwork.com, and email us with your thoughts, kl@kerrylutz.com. John, till next week.
See you, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.